So, biohacking. It's a word you hear thrown around all the time, right? It seems to cover this massive range of stuff. Today, we're going to make sense of it all and break it down into its three main branches.
Yeah, you've definitely heard it. Maybe you picture some Silicon Valley CEO trying to live forever. Or maybe it's that one coworker who's always talking about their latest health kick.
And that's because it's this huge, sprawling world. At one end, it can be something as simple and familiar as the fitness tracker that you might even be wearing on your wrist right now. But then, on the complete other end of that spectrum, you've got this wild, multi-million-dollar quest to literally reverse aging and, well, defeat death itself. So how do we wrap our heads around that massive range? What are the real branches of this sometimes fascinating, sometimes controversial movement? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down.
Okay, first things first, let's get on the same page. At its core, biohacking is really just about intentionally using science-backed strategies, we're talking nutrition, sleep, data tracking, to boost your own biological performance. Think of it as taking the driver's seat of your own biology, with data as your map.
And that idea of data and tracking, that leads us straight into our first and probably the most popular branch, the quantified self. It's pretty much what it sounds like. It is all about knowing your numbers.
The whole philosophy was summed up perfectly years ago by Gary Wolfe and Kevin Kelly over at Wired magazine. Self-knowledge through numbers. And really, this is the gateway for so many people. The big idea is that if you can track it, you can understand it, and if you can understand it, you can improve it.
And man, has the tech for this just completely exploded. Think about it. Back in 2010, you had things like the Nike Plus Fuel Band, right? You were actively tracking basically just your steps. Fast forward 5 years to 2015, the Apple Watch comes out and suddenly passive, multi-metric tracking is just normal. And now we've got stuff like the Oura Ring, these invisible sensors giving us clinical-grade data on our sleep and heart health, and we don't even have to lift a finger.
But what's really mind-blowing here isn't just the devices, it's the data we're getting. We've gone from just counting steps to tracking incredibly nuanced metrics like heart rate variability, or HRV, which gives you this sophisticated look at your body's stress and recovery. Sleep tracking isn't just how long were you asleep anymore, it's deep versus REM sleep stages. We're even moving from painstakingly logging every meal to using things like continuous glucose monitors. The level of detail is just incredible.
And here's the bottom line, these things have totally transformed. They're not just fancy lifestyle gadgets anymore. They are becoming powerful diagnostic tools. I mean, we're talking about devices that are now FDA cleared to detect serious conditions like atrial fibrillation and sleep apnea. That is a massive shift for preventative healthcare.
Okay, so you've got all this data, now what? What do you actually do with it? Well, that brings us right to our second branch, lifestyle biohacking. You could also call it syncing with your system. This is where we move past just passively tracking and start actively using that info to make real, intentional changes.
And here's a perfect example of why this matters so much. Personalization. For decades, so much of the health and fitness advice out there was basically built around male biology, this daily testosterone-driven cycle. But female-centric biohacking is shining a huge spotlight on a totally different hormonal reality, one that fluctuates over a monthly cycle. And it turns out, what works for one body might be completely wrong for another. A strategy like aggressive fasting, for instance, can have totally different and sometimes negative effects.
And this is where it gets super practical. Instead of just grinding through the same high-intensity workout every single day, the idea is to sync what you're doing with your body's natural rhythm. So during the follicular phase when estrogen is on the rise, that's a perfect time to go hard on strength training. But during the menstrual phase, your body's calling for rest and gentle movement. It's a total paradigm shift from fighting your body to working with it.
All right, now let's get into the deep end. This brings us to the third, and by far the most extreme, branch of biohacking, radical longevity. The whole premise here is kind of wild. It's the idea that life itself isn't some great mystery, it's an algorithm. And if it's an algorithm, well, it can be hacked, optimized, and maybe even reversed.
And if you want a poster child for this movement, look no further than entrepreneur Brian Johnson. His whole blueprint project is built on this one stunningly simple yet totally radical idea. He literally said, "My mind is unauthorized to make any food-related decision." Just think about that. It's about completely taking messy, unreliable human willpower out of the equation.
And why would someone do this? Well, here's the claim. According to his massive pile of data, his pace of aging has slowed way, way down. For every 365 days that pass on the calendar, his biological systems are only aging the equivalent of 252 days. Now that is the kind of mind-bending result that gets this whole branch of the movement so much attention.
So what's the philosophy behind this? Well, you can really think of it as a form of rebellion. It's choosing systems over willpower, hard data over gut feelings. It's a rebellion against junk food ads, against social norms that push us toward unhealthy choices, and against what he calls self-aided destruction.
The end game here, the grand vision, is to create what he calls an autonomous self. Imagine an algorithm, a system built entirely on your biological data that makes better health decisions for you than your conscious mind ever could. It totally reframes the idea of aging, from an inevitable fate to a technical problem that just might be solvable.
But, okay, this all sounds pretty futuristic, and this relentless pursuit of optimization, this idea of turning our bodies into nonstop data streams, it definitely comes with some pretty big questions and potential trade-offs. There's a dark side to all this data.
And we're not talking about some far-off sci-fi scenario here. This stuff is happening right now. You had the huge 23andMe data breach that specifically went after people with certain genetic backgrounds. You had Strava's heat maps accidentally outing the locations of world leaders through their security staff. And then when 23andMe filed for bankruptcy, this terrifying question popped up. What if your DNA, your literal genetic code, could be sold off like an office chair in a liquidation sale?
And it's not just about security breaches. The technology itself has biases baked right in. It's been confirmed that the optical heart rate sensors that are in so many of these wearables, well, they're just not as accurate on darker skin tones. And that's not a minor bug. That's a fundamental problem that could lead to bad data and even misdiagnoses for millions of people.
So all of this leaves us with a really important question we all have to ask ourselves. As we become these walking, talking data streams, what's the end goal? Are we actually optimizing for real, genuine health and well-being? Or are we just inventing a brand new, more quantifiable kind of anxiety for ourselves?